All right, so welcome to today's podcast on teaching others what I need to learn, or I should say teaching others what we need to learn. And so, because if you weren't listening to it, then you probably wouldn't need to know it, right? Anyway, my name is Scott Engler. I am a published author and thought leader on contemporary job search strategies, career development, and business development. Help people with optimizing their LinkedIn and to get better jobs and to build their business. So today, what I want to talk about is a really important one, and that's how do we own our value and get paid what we believe we deserve, or maybe believe that we don't deserve, and that's why it's scary for us to ask for what, that scary amount might be. So when I started my own company, BYOB Coaching and Consulting, about 3.5-4 years ago now, I had to learn to charge an amount. And here's the thing: when you have the freedom to quote someone $1 million or $1, it becomes a lot scarier than when you might just have like a set amount that you're getting paid. Now, whether you're working for a corporation or franchise, or whether you're an entrepreneur, I feel like people don't really take the time to understand the principle of how they could get paid what they deserve. And so I'll share just what's worked and not worked for me. The first thing is I want to say that there's no perfect amount, right? I feel like the harder I tried to have like a perfect amount based on certain criteria, that the more confusing things felt. So what I found that worked was that I did my homework, and I think that's part of what people don't do, is looking at the marketplace, looking at where you live, factoring in certain things and what other professionals charge for a certain amount of experience. And then there comes a point when you have to start looking at the added value, right, that you may have. So someone could be, let's say you're working for a company and you're the director of operations, and you're applying for a position, right, as director of operations. Now, you could be going up against 5 other people that have around the same amount of experience of you. Let's say there's like between 12 and 15 years. But you, in your career, the outcome of the work you've produced has saved companies, let's say, $10 million, whereas everybody else hasn't even hit $1 million in their 12-year career. I'm just giving an example, so I'm throwing out numbers. Now, when you're able to quantify something like that, that makes you worth more. It's the same way as, when I do presentations and I talk about, Kobe Bryant and let's say Dwight Howard or somebody, and they could have the same amount of experience, but then Kobe Bryant tells you, well, I led my team to 5 NBA titles. I'm the second all-time leading scorer in the history of the world's largest professional basketball association, and I've, 18-time All-Star, blah, 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 so he's throwing down some heavy stats there. Now, when you could show that kind of production in your past, doesn't it then make a lot more sense why he's going to be getting paid $5 million more a year than somebody that hasn't won a championship, isn't anywhere close to anywhere of those kind of statistics, hasn't had that kind of an impact? So that's another thing to consider. The other thing is what do you offer as a business professional or entrepreneur that's different? Because I really like the law of differentiation. So it's like the law of differentiation says that the more we differentiate ourselves in a way that is positive and effective, the less price sensitive people will be. But the less we differentiate ourselves from others, the more price sensitive they'll be. So, what I've used as an example, as compared with other career coaches, something that that I offer that a lot of career coaches I've spoken with or talked to don't is I've now published 2 books. So as a career coach, it's like, well, I've also written 2 publications that include interviews with the top experts in recruiting and career development and dozens and dozens of hiring managers, people in HR, management consultants. So a lot of the information in the publication I've gotten through a ton of research and hard work, and you're working with the author of that. And so I'm not saying that in any way to brag, but it's also something that separates me from other people, other professionals. Like, just to give you a point of reference, there's a very low likelihood, I would say, that a career counselor or a career coach at a career development department has written 2 contemporary publications on finding a job. And so, when you have things like that you include with your coaching or service, it's then raising the value, right? I have a 10-week career course. I have a 5-week business development course. I have a specialized LinkedIn training for job seekers. So again, there's things that I include with my service that really sets me apart in certain ways. Now, does that mean that I'm the best at what I do? No, not necessarily. It just means that I'm adding in a lot of valuable current and contemporary research and products into my service that have gotten people really good results. So there's added value in there. And then that's when obviously it makes more sense to charge more, because if I'm giving people $1,500 worth of a 10-week course and a LinkedIn training on top of my coaching, that's already $1,500 right there. So that's where that's where those things really factor in, as far as from a business professional standpoint. Really, it's about what you feel is going to. It needs to be an exchange. I see money as an exchange of energy in its purest form. Is there needs to be a give and take, right? If I'm asking for a lot more than I feel like I'm outputting, then there's an imbalance. And if I'm asking for a lot less than I'm giving out, there's also an imbalance, right? And that number has looked different for me in different situations. I could share one thing that's worked has been to feel how the number feels before I say it. Now, if I'm going to ask for, let's say I'm going to ask for a $20,000 raise at my job, it doesn't mean that just because you feel nervous about asking for it means that it's wrong. In fact, I would point out that when I did up the cost of my services, that I was really nervous and I wasn't sure I wasn't like, oh my God, yeah, I totally deserve this. Oh my God, I'm going to get this. I was nervous, and I remember the first time someone paid me 3 times the amount I was asking for. I was shocked. It was like, oh my gosh, they said yes. Wow, okay. And then so that was my experience and process. And so yeah, that's something that worked for me, is to put it out there. Now, the other thing that you could really do is, something that I've taught clients to do is let your actions speak for themselves and have an upfront agreement to begin with. So what I mean by that, instead of getting a new job, and what people want to do, and I just had an employee do this recently, is they want to ask for a lot of money up front when they haven't done anything for you. And so when you start asking for a lot up front and you haven't done anything for somebody, it could be really irritating. And especially if you don't have as much proof or recommendations, it's like you're going to a company asking to get paid 150 grand instead of what their asking price was for 90 grand or whatever, and you haven't shown them anything. So instead of going that extreme where you're asking for close to double your salary up front, here's what I recommend for people to do. Again, these are all context scenarios, but if you could propose and show on paper, right, well, here's what I did at my last 2 jobs, and I factor in that it's taken me anywhere between 45 to 90 days to really start getting momentum at my new job. So that being said, why don't we say that I could start out at, let's say, 110 because I just don't feel comfortable accepting an offer this low, considering I was getting paid 200 grand at my last job, whatever the case is. And then say, let's say that let me come up with a number and say that I feel confident that I could hit these goals in the next 90 days. And if I don't hit those goals in the next 90 days, well, we could reassess and, maybe I'm not the best person for this position. I don't know, but I feel really confident that I can hit these goals. And if I did hit these goals for you, can we agree that you will pay me what I'm asking for? Because if I'm able to make you, $2 million in, the next 3 quarters, isn't that worth a $60,000 raise or, something to that effect? And then just work with them. And I think that that's a really wise approach because you're showing them what you could do for them, right? And you're basically saying, if I can't do it, then I don't know, maybe you need to fire me because I'm not, obviously not performing at the level that I was performing my last 2 jobs. So you're showing confidence in yourself. It's almost like you have like an objective viewpoint, right? You're not taking it so personal. It's almost like you're kind of seeing yourself as a separate entity and working with the other person or persons. So those are the things that I feel have really worked for people and help them get what they want, help me get, more of what I felt like I deserved. And I think it really is a individual case-by-case basis for each person, and the amount is going to change from time to time. So it's helpful to keep these principles in mind because, again, everything's changing. And so you want to, obviously, ideally be asking for more and more for your services over time, not less and less. So that's what I got today, and I hope you were able to get what you needed. And my wish for you is that you take the information, apply it, and see the results.